Hello and welcome to episode 100 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Dr. Camille Preston, a business psychologist, executive coach, and founder of AIM Leadership. Camille has spent the last 2 decades helping leaders and organizations navigate complexity with clarity, presence, and purpose. She's the author of several books, including her latest, Living Real, which explores how to redefine success, presence, and happiness. In this episode, we discuss what it means to communicate with depth, how energy and presence shape your message, and why truly great communicators listen in layers. Camille shares insights from her work with executive teams, including the dangers of rage-based leadership, the thinning of workplace relationships, and the importance of creating space for authentic conversations. Whether you're coaching leaders, managing teams, or working to deepen your own impact, you'll walk away with thoughtful strategies for becoming a more grounded and effective communicator. Let's dive in. Camille, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm thrilled and looking forward to some fun conversation, communication.
Absolutely. Yes, I am sure it will be lots of fun, lots of learning. Before we get too far into it, why don't you maybe tell the listeners just a little bit about you, maybe your background, your career journey, and the exciting work that you're doing today?
Sure. So I'm a business psychologist and I run AIM Leadership. It's a company that I've had for 22 years. But if my father was still alive, he would probably tell you that I started asking really difficult questions when I was about 3.5. So I'm the youngest in my family and the youngest of a ton of cousins, he said, but you would always come up with these like deep probing questions and we're never really satisfied with a quick response. So I've been got my doctorate in 2000 and I've had my company since 2004. So 22 years. And it's been this incredibly fun journey going from, an executive coach to developing training, to writing books, to keynotes. And now we're really working with executive teams, supporting them and figuring out what does it mean to live real? How do you start to not only do excellent work as a leader, but also really find that level of joy, fulfillment, kind of alignment that makes doing hard things sustainable. That's a lot in a breath.
That was fantastic. Very concise. I like it. So you mentioned, right, very early on, inquisitive, asking these deep, thought-provoking questions. So what do you think, I guess, led you into the work that you're doing today? What drew you to that?
That's a great question. I think some part of it is there's an innate kind of curiosity and like loving to figure things out and a desire to serve. I had 2 parents that were in the public service sector, and then I think a lot was being the youngest of 3. I joked that I was maybe not a sharp pencil, that I was like 5 before I realized I was much younger than my siblings and maybe I shouldn't be able to keep up. But I had that mindset early on of like, okay, how do I cut corners? What is the outcome? How do I get there in the fastest way possible? And I feel like that's like a through line in my life.
Oh, fantastic. So with the work that you're doing today, coaching, working with lots of executives, doing keynotes, I'm sure you encounter folks that have really strong communication skills, likely some folks that don't, and we can learn from both of them. I've always found throughout my career, right? Everything's a learning opportunity. Learn what to do, learn what not to do. But as you think about some of those experiences of interactions with great communicators, or when somebody says this person has really strong communication skills, what's the image that comes to mind for you?
I think if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said someone who's clear, decisive, articulate, has gravitas, commands the front of the room. But today, I think it's about people who can engage, who can initiate an energy that they can bring what they're passionate about and bring that through so that they are communicating it with others, but not necessarily speaking at, but activating with. So enlivening, engaging, helping people feel as excited about something as they are.
Yes, I'd love to talk a little about this concept of engaging and the energy, because I do think sometimes people conflate engaging with charismatic and boisterous and the sage on the stage, the great person delivering the rousing keynote. But those are very distinct, different things. You can be very much engaging without being, loud and outspoken and being able to, quote, command the room, what people traditionally think of. So when you think of an engaging communicator, what are some of the things that they're doing that I think makes them engaging?
I think it's the energy they bring, but what they evoke in others. So obviously you want to captivate people, but you want people to hear your words, integrate it, think about how it applies to you. And I'm guessing, kind of thinking on riffing on the spot, but I'm thinking it's about what do I do after I've spent time with you, after I've heard your message? How do I take those ideas into action? And I think that's like communication has landed in those moments.
Really engaging communicators are the ones that ultimately move people to action. And a big part of that, I think, is your energy. So, if
Hmm.
I think through my career and whether it was direct leaders like my manager or the very top leaders of the organization, depending on their energy can impact the tone of the team. So some people have just this
Hmm.
very frantic energy, this nervous energy that when you're around them, it kind of put you on edge or on guard a little
Hmm.
bit versus
Hmm.
some leaders amidst total chaos, kind of keeping that even keel, not necessarily phony, like, oh, everything's great and happy and things are falling apart, but they kept that calm composure about that, which somehow
Hmm.
I think kind of pulled you in more so than somebody that was maybe trying to distract you with the loud noises and the bright, shiny objects. So I do think
Yeah,
that energy plays a big
yeah,
part on how you are engaging as a communicator. And as you mentioned, moving people to action, because that's really what's important when it
yeah.
comes to communication is ultimately you're wanting someone to do something at the end of it.
Absolutely. It's funny as you're talking, I'm listening and pulling back the memories. Last summer, I was doing an offsite for a publicly traded company, and we were less than 5 minutes into this 2 day offsite, and the CEO said, "We need more rage-based leadership." And in that moment, I remember thinking, I must have misheard him. Rage-based leadership. I don't know what that is.
I
And then
thought
I
I
was like,
misheard
no,
you as well. Okay.
exactly. I was like, okay, I heard him correctly. I don't know what rage-based leadership is. And here I am, like just starting this offsite. Um, and what I like distilled and pulled back is that he wants to activate, he wants to energize, he wants to create a level of urgency and ownership and like engagement where people take kind of where they are as dire and like really an existential threat that would activate. But the rage-based leadership, that's how he had experienced that level of activation. It didn't translate. And what you saw was just this like contraction, almost like this primal, let me cover my inner organs. And so I think how you like, I think it's important to think about the energetic experience and the outcomes, and then how you bring those together. And obviously you have to do it in a way that's authentic for yourself, but also aligned with who your audience is.
And I actually have an article bookmark to read later. I saw it in my news feed, and it was something about leaders are moving away from the empathetic, kind of understanding style of leadership. I think more towards that type of just grinding, driving, almost rage-based leadership, which I was like, oh gosh, hopefully this is just some clickbait and this isn't actually true that people think this is good, because you can short term, will that get some results?
Yes.
Likely, right? They are going to be very much short term. You're going to turn your people off. You're going to burn your people out. They're going to leave. They're going to be going
Mm-hmm.
through that nasty cycle.
100%.
Versus if you are in a bad situation, you can create I think the same level of urgency with your team
Hmm.
by being open, honest, transparent, and focusing on what's the most important thing we need to do. It's like X, Y, and Z is going on. Here's where we are.
Yes.
Here's where we need to be. Here are the three things we need to be laser focused on in order to get there. So I think it's just, you might get the same outcome, but a much different approach is going to long term give you a lot more success.
100%. 100%. And as I'm listening to you, I think what I'm also hearing is great communicators get altitude, get perspective, think strategically, are able to step back and see the forest and the trees in the longer term direction. And maybe I'd be curious what this article says. So please forward that to me when you, if it's not clickbait. Um, And I think what people are saying is they want to understand, how do they enliven their team? How do they get people inspired and really engaged rather than activated, which is like the cortisol based leadership. And so I think we are at this tipping point. Um, And I think, you're seeing some organization, I'm seeing organizations that have younger folks saying, my well-being is as important as your bottom line. And so let's figure out communication that aligns how you can get the results you need and it can be a good place. And people are voting with their feet on that in more ways.
And Camille, that's actually a very nice segue to what I wanted to talk about next, which is really around the skills that are needed in the workplace today.
Mm,
Really, whether it be a globally interconnected workforce, much more so than it has been in past decades, the idea of multi-generational workforces, which have always been around, but because I
mhm.
think of the rate of change of technology, the skill sets and the
Yeah.
way people communicate across generations are very much different and often misaligned. And really,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, what people are looking for from their employers and what they bring to the table. I think there's some sort of a disconnect there. So as the work that you're doing today, working with leadership teams, working with executives, what are you seeing as some of those really mission critical communication skills that either leaders need to have or that they're looking for in their employees coming in?
I want to pull a couple threads for what you said about generational differences. We're working across a spread out geography, we're working across hybrid work environments. But underlying all of that is a thinning of relationships. People are moving jobs more quickly, so they have less understanding and knowledge of the people that they're working with. They have less pattern recognition. You're dealing with, we're seeing in the workplace people who have less pattern recognition of workplaces, right? They didn't have a certain set of skills. And so all of that, when you put communication, effective communication on top of all of that, it becomes even more important, right? And it becomes even more important to have the EQ, the emotional intelligence, to be able to say, okay, what are my outcomes? What do I need to deliver on? But who am I speaking to? How do they engage? How do they process information? Are they a global to specific person? Are they a visual person? Do they need a meta message? Do they need the specifics? And so I think leaders of great communicators, leaders who are going to communicate with excellence and poise and gravitas and impact are going to be able to take in all those cues and take in all that data and being able to adapt and respond accordingly. And they have to do all of that authentically while being real and genuine. So it's, I mean, the stakes are rising.
Being a leader today is no easy feat, right? For a number of
Hmm.
those things that you just mentioned. And I love this concept that you talked about of thinning of relationships. I had never really thought
Mm,
about this before, but a lot of times when I talk about being an effective leader in communication, so much of it is really around it's not about me anymore, it's about my team. I need to
hmm.
focus on understanding what motivates them, what drives them, how are they understanding things, how do I need to explain things or update them on things. Can they handle it if they get it in an email? Will people need to have a follow-up meeting or a phone call to discuss
Hmm.
whatever it may be? And that takes time, as you mentioned, to recognize those patterns with people. Like last time we did this and it didn't go well. Next time we did this and it went well. But if you're
Hmm.
churning through people and maybe through no fault of your own, but just because of the nature of work today, where people do job hop quite frequently, if you're going through people every 18, 24 months, as soon as you're kind of really getting into a rhythm with your communication and understanding what works best for this person or this team, you're starting back over. So that is a big challenge. And I think something that leaders need to be aware of that as you are working with your team, obviously, the more you can communicate with them, the more reps you get in, the quicker you're going to pick up on some of those patterns. But then ultimately
Hmm.
realizing just because the last person worked this way does not
Doesn't
mean
mean.
the next person in this seat is going to be the same way.
And also, that goes back to our earlier thread. You have to get altitude perspective, think strategically rather than just diving into the communication. Um, I recently came out with a book called Living Real, and it really came from a season of grief. I had 5 deaths in 5 months. But the thesis is the idea that life is like a sine wave. There's highs and lows. There's like peak experiences and low experiences. And what I was seeing is that people go through hard things and they kind of, the term I coined was shallow. They push away the hard things. They're like, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to process that. But in pushing away the hard things, they push away the joy. And so what was a sine wave that was like this becomes a sine wave like that. I'm sharing it because I see it happening in communication where people are like, this is not safe. This is not safe. And so then communication gets more and more shallow and it's hard to engage. It's hard to collaborate. People are like, these are safe topics. These are not safe topics. This is a safe way to say it. This is this, right? And so you're seeing, um, in addition to the thinning of relationships, you're seeing a shallowing of how people engage. And that's a bigger systemic opportunity for organizations to start to say, okay, so like what is it we want? I'm going to throw in one more variable because I'm just
Mhm.
complexifying our conversation. There's the thinning of relationships, there's a shallowing of communication, but we're also in a mental health pandemic. So we have unprecedented loneliness. Depression is at a high, anxiety, burnout. And all I think it's a confluence of all of these factors,
Mhm.
the thinning, shallowing, not necessarily being able to take the time you need as an effective communicator to really get a lay of the land, understand your team, think about outcomes, but just an urgency and a drive. And so you are absolutely right. It is a landmine for great communicators to really think strategically.
And I would imagine that with that shallowing of the communication that you mentioned, it's going to have an impact on authenticity. Because if people
Hmm.
feel that I'm kind of maybe boxed in as to how I can communicate or how I should say things or what I should say or who it should be said to or the mode I should use to communicate it, you definitely lose some of that authenticity there, in which is for me one of the crucial things for effective communication is authenticity, that there's
Hmm.
alignment between what I say, how I say it, and how I quote look when I say it, right? So my facial expressions and my energy
Hmm.
matching what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So I think when you start to shallow, you're going to strip away some of that authenticity and further erode the effect of the communication.
Absolutely. And then are my actions aligned with my words is a whole other layer. And then you put in the whole thing that people are so carefully curating their social media brand, and that gets complicated too, right? Because that's another way that we shallow. So yeah, it is getting altitude to think strategically for these communicators. Not only what do they need, but what do other people in their stakeholder group need? It's really, really important. Sounds like you're doing really good work for your clients and your team.
Well, I was just going to say, fortunately for both of us, these are all skills, right? That leaders can develop these types of skills. Anyone can develop their communication
Hmm.
skills, right? It takes work. There may be some, as you mentioned earlier, some innate natural strengths that are going to be there. But typically, when you see somebody that's a great leader or a strong communicator, one throughout their professional career, they've worked on it. They've taken
It's
opportunities,
investment.
they've
Yeah.
provided opportunities, they've gone to training, they've worked with executive coaches. But even early on, if I think about my kids, I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old now,
Mhm.
and we're always providing them opportunities to practice their communication skills, even from a young age, whether it was just the conversations that we had with them, encouraging them to question things and to not shut down questions,
Mhm.
going out to dinner, going to the doctor's office, anywhere. They're the ones that are communicating because it increases the comfort level, just like
Mhm.
any muscle. The more you flex it, the more it's going to grow, the stronger it's going to get. So yeah, these are all things that absolutely can be taught and developed if you work at it.
And what I love about the example with your kids is you're giving them experience and you're embedding meaning. Like you're putting them in the driver's seat so they build muscle memory, but you're also putting a context to hold that what they're doing. So that's brilliant. Can I send my 10 and 11, my 10 and 12-year-old to you for a little
Yeah.
communication?
I am tapped out right now with teens and preteens, between
I
them
can
and all their
imagine.
friends that are constantly here. Oh goodness.
I can imagine. I love it.
Camille, as you think about your career and the success that you've had and the business that you've built and the work that you're doing, if I ask someone close to you, whether it's a family member or colleague, and I said, what's kind of the key communication skill that has helped Camille get to where she is today, what would they share with me?
Mm, it's a great question. Um, I think depending on who, like it might fall in two camps. I think one group would say intuition. Like one group would say she listens very deeply. She listens to what's being said, what's happening below the surface, what's happening below the surface. So she's listening in layers, not just to the words that were spoken. And then the other group would probably say she's pulling that listening through her intuition and her wisdom. And she's learned to really trust that inner compass of communication. Those are hard skills to develop and not
Yes.
necessarily rewarded in our world, right?
Absolutely. I think the intuition typically comes from experience, right? So it's going to take time, right? I've
Hmm.
been through this. I have
Hmm.
my compass, my moral compass. I know what's right. I'm going to make decisions based off of that, based on also these lived past experiences that I've had in my life. And then the listening absolutely is that hard skill to
Hmm.
develop, to truly deeply listen. As you mentioned, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this idea of listening in layers. Because a lot
Hmm.
of people are great at hearing. A lot of people are good at listening to respond, which is kind of the
Hmm.
cliche phrase, right? You don't listen to understand, you listen just to respond, right? You can tell
Hmm.
when somebody is just waiting for you to stop talking so they can jump in.
Hmm.
But yeah, this idea of really truly deeply listening in layers. Talk a little bit more about that if you can.
Yeah, I think it's so it's and we have a resource on our website that we can link to your show notes on this.
Mhm.
Um, I first came across the concept at a sound retreat. Like a friend was talking about sound, and we started listening close into us, and then in layers, and then further out. And so it was like the chatter around me. Then I could hear things moving in the environment, and then I could hear the wind blowing. And so I started thinking about layers. Um, and a board I was on, they were onboarding a new leader, and she started thinking about layers as she entered this. She was taking over an organization after the prior leader had been there 26 years, and she had to listen in layers of the community and the needs. And so I started taking that concept and really getting people to hone in on their capacity to listen close in, midway out, far out. If this concept is abstract, I encourage people to think about sight. You can look at things close by, far out, further out. Um, we want to develop our capacity to listen in layers externally, but then we want to turn that inward and listen to layers, listen inward in layers, because we often don't give ourselves the time to go as deep into like, how is my body reacting to that? What is my gut intuition on that? What is it that I really want? We don't do that. And that's where, when you listen outward and you listen inward and you put those together, I think you become a much better communicator and a much more aligned and integrated.
So as I think about listening, one of the things I talk a lot about is this idea of listening hygiene. Right? Am I creating an environment where I truly can listen? So, for example, when doing these shows, these recordings, or before I started, it's summertime. I send a text message to the family. Podcast starting in 5 minutes. They know
Hmm.
by now that means don't come in, don't knock at the door, try to keep the dogs quiet, try to keep the chaos to a low
Hmm.
roar throughout the house so that I'm not
Setting a
distracted.
container, a clear
Exactly.
container.
So I'm
Yep.
not distracted by that. My phone is turned off. My email is shut down. My communicator, like Slack type
All of
messages,
that.
are all put to do not disturb so that I know I can focus here. And when possible, I block, the time right after these off my calendar. So I'm not thinking, oh my gosh, I have to hurry up and wrap up
That's
with
nice.
Camille because I have a huge client meeting that I'm going to have 3 minutes to prepare for. So I've created an environment where I can really lock in, and I've done preparation. So I have questions prepared for these
Hmm.
conversations. I know a little bit about you and your background and the work from the things that you and your team have shared. So all of these types of things go into listening, and I think help you to start to listen at those. Like, I'm not only just listening to what you're saying, I'm able to interpret what's behind that, and then also sometimes listening to what's not being said. Right? You listen with your eyes. You can pick up on
Open.
things as to maybe what isn't being said, and if you can help with the teenager selective listening, I'm going to send my kids over your way, or if you have some resources there, that would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. You know, I think we get so busy and so focused on outcomes and delivering, we don't think of that container and how our success is so much more holistic. It's clear outcomes, but then setting ourselves up for success. And I bet it goes even deeper to like exercising and hydrating and having a good meal. Like it's all those pieces that weave together to set us up for success. Um, I think there's one other thing that I'm hearing in all of our conversations, is that I think sometimes we don't listen because we're afraid of what we might hear. We're afraid of what might be asked of us. And I think that's something that happens like in our, it's like when we actually really hear and receive messages,
Mhm.
it can change us.
And that's likely what for some leaders is keeping conversations at a surface level because they don't necessarily want to ask because they are afraid what they might hear, whether it's seeking feedback or getting the true picture as to what's going on within the organization and the company health. Yeah, no,
Yep.
that's a
That's why they
fantastic.
shallow. They fell. I had one I was doing another corporate offsite for a publicly traded tech company in April, and the CEO started the conversation saying, "We have casual commitments," and I was like, "What are casual commitments?" He's like, "Well, we make commitments, but we don't follow up and check in on whether we're actually doing them. And like when people miss them, we don't follow up." I was like, "Huh." How's that working? He's like, not well. I was like, how are your returns? He said, they're casual too. And I was like, that's shallowing, right? Like
Yep.
communication is talking about the highs and the lows. It's the full range. It's that full sine wave.
I thought he was bragging or excited about that. I'm like, is this some new thing? Casual commitments? I want to learn more, but no, definitely not. You need to follow up on those commitments.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Camille, who has been someone who has influenced your communication style? Maybe, someone you worked with, a family member, whatever it may be, but you've likely picked up on something that they do and you've started to incorporate it into your own skill set around communication.
Mm. Well, that's like a whole other hour long conversation because I think what makes for good communicators is identifying, oh, that is effective, that's not effective, as you said. But I think the two people that come to mind right now, one is a gentleman, Bill Corvo, who is someone I've had the privilege of facilitating with from Afghanistan to Thailand to all over the United States. Um, and he is so able to adjust his style so that messages land for people that he's communicating with. And he brings an incredibly sharp wit. So it's often in a self-deprecating kind of humor, but it's it's almost magical in how it opens people up when he is able to adapt his message and then bring humor into the conversation. And the other person is who's I'm just totally tickled by right now is I have a 12-year-old son who's so stinking funny. And I'm starting to notice how he's using humor to get what he wants from me. And I'm like, oh, there's a there.
Yeah,
So,
I love the two things, humor and adapting. So I'm a big comedy humor fan, and you understanding how you can incorporate that into your communications. And I would say too, both of my kids, my 13-year-old daughter and 16-year-old son, they just have this sharp wit about them. They'll
yeah.
just make comments, and this goes back for my son years and years until he was probably at 5 at the point. He would say stuff. I'm like, where did that even come from? But
Exactly.
it does definitely it helps, right? It can ease tensions, it can break the ice on stuff, it can help people feel comfortable and open up. But really, this idea of adapting to your audience is massive. And it's
Hmm.
to me, it's not about being phony, it's not about being inauthentic, it's understanding what's important to this audience and
Hmm.
likely what's the way that they would receive this message best, right? Just it may be slight tweaks in tone or in energy levels, but really figuring out for Camille, what's going to be most important for her to get out of this, and how do I tailor my message around that?
And I just want to take one more step forward on that because it's absolutely spot on. And it's being agile in how you adapt while also being authentic to who you are. Right. Like you can't be duplicitous and changing your
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying, but it's holding that message and articulating it in a way that it can land for the person while being
Yes.
authentic.
And sometimes that 1 to 2 degree shift, right, makes
Makes
all
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 the
the
difference.
all the difference, right? I remember years ago going through a leadership course. It was called like 212 training, right? At 211 degrees, water doesn't boil. 212 degrees, water boils. It creates steam and it can power a locomotive. That 1 degree difference can make a difference. And sometimes with your communications, that slight little tweak, whether it's the tone, some of the words that you use, when you deliver it, how you deliver it, will make a massive impact.
Totally. Totally.
Camille, as we are wrapping up here, two questions for you. One, closing advice do you have for folks listening to
Mm.
this really around the importance of the skills we talked about today? And if people want to get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about you and your work, what are the best ways to do that? So I can put it in the show notes.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Um, I think we are at such an intense time and there's so much happening. And I see so many people desiring to be a really good communicator. I would urge people to spend a little time with themselves, whether it's in nature, whether it's in the early mornings, late evenings, whether it's moving your body, just a little time bringing that communication home to your own message and your own alignment and your own integration. We're so focused externally right now that if we put a little investment internally, we can shift how we engage that will have a ripple. And I think that's a really accessible thing for people to do. Um, my companies, you can, I will say, you can check out the book at livingreal.aimleadership.com, or you can just check out AIM Leadership, all one word, aimleadership.com, where you can learn more about me and get in touch. We are deeply passionate about helping people have real conversations. And so if the idea of moving away from shallowing into reeling is of interest, we have a lot of tools to help people think about how do they set up a conversation with friends? How do they host a reeling dinner? What does it mean to reel more effectively? And would love to share those because communication is where it's at. Relationship is so vital to our well-being, our mental health, our sustainability, our impact, that we're really excited to be helping people in that way. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It's been fun. I feel like I've learned a lot in this and I'm grateful.
Yeah, thank you as well. Really appreciate it. Some great advice, some great tips. And the one thing that you talked about just at the end there is around nature. And I really encourage the folks that
Mm,
were listening, a past guest, a recent guest, we just talked about this, the importance of getting out into nature and how it can help you just process, to think, to listen. For me, I am dedicated with my calendar. I block time every day to get out and go for a walk. 30 minutes. I just get outside, I walk in the neighborhood, walk through the trails, even though it's a million degrees out right now. I'm getting out there. It just, for me, it helps me clear my head, helps me relax, unwind. I do it midday. It just
mhm.
kind of helps to break the day up, to relieve some of the stress and the tension from the morning, to really ground me for the afternoon. So I say, if you're listening to this and you're able to just get outside, enjoy some of the
Go hug
nature,
a tree.
really,
Go hug a
yes,
tree. It's like the roots go into the earth, the branches go into the sky. You'll be so much more open. I love that. I will think of you on my walks. Thank you. That's awesome.
perfect.
Yeah.
Camille, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Likewise. Stay well.
Take care. Special thanks again to my guest, Dr. Camille Preston, for joining us and sharing her insights on leading with presence, listening in layers, and breaking through the noise with real human communication. As we wrap up, remember that communication mastery isn't about charisma, it's about connection. It's built through self-awareness, strategic listening, and the courage to engage meaningfully. Subscribe to Communicast so you can continue learning from compelling leaders like Camille. And if today's conversation resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you left a rating or review. It helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. Thanks for tuning in to episode 100, and here's to your next step in becoming a more impactful communicator. Have a great day.